Well, why?
You were dating police officers?
Oh, yeah, back in the day.
And
I'd just gotten out of school. I dated...
You were a cop lover?
Yeah, that was before I...
Can I smack you?
Well, I never made love to them, but I was dating them. Actually, I had a really good friend who went in high school. When we got out of high school, and I wrote to him while he was in...
What about you wrote to him what?
When he was in Vietnam, and he became a police officer, and we were good friends for a long time.
So, what about on the show? Who was playing devil's advocate? What, KNST or Sep?
I think it was Paul Birmingham that was making statements, and then the other guy, the producer, was making some statements that were really good on our side. So I think they probably got together and decided to do this devil advocate thing. But they were making statements like we've been making, and he was getting off on it, and doing his little shouting thing. But it was a pretty good show.
And then you just said, based on your experiences with cops, they don't deserve our trust or something of that nature?
What I said?
Yeah.
My experiences?
Yeah.
Throughout my years?
Yeah.
After dating them when I got out of high school?
After dating them?
Yeah. I don't...
What about the sheriffs that were killed down at the railroad tracks? And then you went to court to tell them that, I told them they couldn't be seen, and they said they don't care. And then they got killed and they got checks. What about that issue?
No, they didn't say they didn't care. When I went to court to testify, they intimidated me and scared me.
No!
Outside the courtroom, the one big tall sheriff came and towered down on me and said, "Are you sure you remember what was said?" or something like that. I can't remember. But he intimidated me, and then they told me the lawyer told me I couldn't say the things that I had to say, and I thought, look, this is a courtroom?
Because if you'd have said what you had to say,
then he wouldn't.
Then it would have been contributory negligence, and he'd look stupid, and his family wouldn't have got the pension check, probably.
Because of contributory negligence, his wife wouldn't have had the taxpayer dollars paying her all these years.
So that's what they did to you.
That's what they did to me.
You
They
from,
scared the shit out of me.
And that was our Pima County Sheriffs, right?
That was Pima County Sheriff.
To tell me about this sheriff's thing on the street out here when they were holding down a guy, kicking him, and he spit out some blood because they abused him. And so they sprayed him with pepper spray again or something of that nature? I can't remember the details.
Well, the dogs woke me up and I went out and they had him down on the ground. They had thrown him down on the ground and his face was in the dirt and he was trying to spit out the dirt and the blood because he said, "I think you broke my nose," or something like that. I can't remember. It's been a while. But he was spitting out blood and they told him, "Don't spit, don't spit." And he said, "But I've got blood in my mouth," and he tried to breathe, and they sprayed him with pepper spray. And then they took their dog, and they had him kind of hog-tied. They took their dog, and the dog was barking at his crotch like it was going to eat up his family jewels or something. And then one time he tried to move so that he could breathe and get the blood out of his mouth, and they kicked him. And then there were three of them, and one of them went to the trunk of his car. And I'll never forget this. He took this wrapped thing out of the trunk of his car, and from a distance to me it looked like a gun. And he talked to the other two officers, and they both shook their head, and they said, "No, no, no." So he took and wrapped the item up and put it back in the back of his car. And to me it looked like a gun. I can't say for sure, but I thought at that time I thought, my God, they're going to plant this as evidence on...
Well, it's happened to me. In a case with the sheriff's Robert R. Muzzy, they tampered with physical evidence, added evidence to other alleged evidence.
This is one of the other reasons I don't trust them.
Yeah.
And when I called, I tried to get information on who this guy was because I didn't know him, and he lived across the street, but I never met him. And so I found out that apparently he had some trouble with the law, so I wanted to call his probation officer and tell him, hey, they really abused this guy. I stood there and watched. I was in shock. I could not move. I could not go back into the house and tell anybody anything because I was in shock as what they were doing. They were kicking on him. They were, and anyway, they then picked him up by they had him hogtied, so they picked him up by his wings. He looked like he had wing, like a chicken wing, whatever. They picked him up by his wings and threw him into the cop car where he couldn't breathe, and I thought he was suffocating because he kept saying, I can't breathe, and they just threw him in. So,
why
but
couldn't
anyway,
he breathe? The pepper spray?
I'm sorry?
Why couldn't he breathe? The pepper spray?
Well, I don't know.
Broken nose?
They sprayed him a couple times, so I don't know. But then they threw him in on his stomach into the cop car. So I assume if he had a broken nose and he was bleeding, it would be a little bit difficult to breathe.
Did they spray him? Did the Pima County Sheriff's pepper spray him before or after he was cuffed?
They were talking really calmly and saying, "Now I can't remember. We don't want," but they were talking really calmly, and they were saying, "Don't spit, don't do this, blah blah blah," real melodically, and he kept trying to breathe, and he kept saying, "But I got to spit out the blood," and then they sprayed him. I mean, there was no reason for it. He was hogtied. He was on his stomach, and they sprayed him in the face. And then he said, "He can't breathe. I can't breathe." And it's a long thing. I
remember.
I wrote it down. I've got it somewhere in my files. I don't know where on the God's green earth. But I was so traumatized by that. When I called the next day and talked to his probation officer, who was an ex-LA policeman, he told me, or something, I don't know. He told me that if I was going to go against three sheriffs, I'd better get myself a damn good lawyer. Scared the crap out of me. I was not only traumatized by what they did that night, I was traumatized by the system, who told me that if I made a complaint for this man, I don't care if he was guilty. That has nothing to do with the way they meant.
It has nothing to do with excessive force.
Nothing to do with it. And then I was told that I would have a lawsuit brought against me because I wanted to tell what they did to him, and this was supposed to be his probation officer who told me this. I mean, my God, what? And I'm supposed to trust these people when I'm trying to facilitate and let them know what's happened, and then they accuse me or tell me that I have to get a lawyer because I'm a witness. I am just there are so many things that just, even in my youth when I was followed and almost ran out of gas by some pervert one night on my way home from work. This man kept following me. I looked and looked and looked for I wasn't going to drive home, so I turned around. I finally got his license plate number. I finally got the description of his car, and I headed into town, and I was on empty. My gas was on empty because I had been driving around trying to lose this man that was following me. I finally found a policeman, said, "I have all this information." My knees were shaking. I dropped to the ground, and he would not take the report. And he told me, "Oh, well, he's probably out of town by now." What?
So
what?
This is the trust factors
I'm supposed to trust these people?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to trust when somebody breaks down a door that it really is.
Now, how about the recent Marine shooting where the lawyer got on TV and said that if it looks like the cops to open the door, well, how will that affect people being home invaded by fake police if they open the door? And do you think the Sheriff's Department will be responsible for their legal advisor's statement?
Well, this man has never had somebody come at him like that. So he doesn't. He only knows the law. He's never been physically abused. He's never apparently watched somebody being physically abused. And what am I supposed to do if I'm in the bathroom and come out and there's people yelling that there's cops and I just woke up? What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to just say, "Oh yeah, welcome, do whatever you want"? This is supposed to be our homes. This is supposed to be our sanctuaries. This is worse than the Stamp Act that the King of England put on the people. I mean, they were allowed to come into the homes and see whatever had been purchased, and if it didn't have the Stamp of England on it, you were arrested. Come on. We're supposed to be above all that. What happened to our country? What happened to our freedom? What happened to our sanctuaries, our homes? This seemed to begin in the 60s. I don't know. But it seemed to begin in the 60s.
I heard a sheriff also recently from the SWAT team, whether he's on it or now, he was on the radio, I believe, yesterday. He said that there's 3 levels of protection. First, the innocent, then themselves, and then the suspect. And that's to maintain their rights and everything, basically.
It used to be, when I was growing up, they were peace officers, and they shoot to maim, never to kill. They would shoot to maim and never to kill. With this war on drugs, they have made a war against
the people.
All of us. They have made a war against all of us. We're all guilty until proven innocent,
well,
apparently, according to the way they deal with us.
In my mind, they're all guilty of war crimes.
Well, this is a war crime because it's the war on drugs. They said they were after drug things, so this is a war crime. Because this man, his family that you were talking about, one of his family apparently a year ago or so was invaded by people who said they were police officers and said that they were there legally, and apparently they weren't. And I think somebody was killed in that thing also. So he had a history of knowing that fake cops come in and do this kind of stuff. And apparently, this is what I've read and heard, apparently it happened to his family, that they were accosted by fake cops. So is he going to believe them?
Were they fake cops or were they real cops?
No, last time they were
cops?
No, his family apparently was accosted by a home invasion break-in who said they were cops. I don't know because I've only read that and heard it.
Right. So my question in theory is, were they really fake cops or could they have possibly been real cops?
Could they have been real cops?
Acting as fake cops.
Acting as fake cops?
And maybe he had information on that. I'm speculating, and
day and
they
age,
had to shut him up.
Yeah, who do you believe?
Well, back to the sheriff real quick. That he was on the SWAT team, and he made those statements that there's 3 levels of protecting rights, basically. Well, he takes the oath. He said he believes in the Constitution. And political power is inherent to people, and the government derives their just power from the consent of the governed and are established to protect and maintain individual rights, period. There is no subsections A, B, C, or D which would stipulate what would be an acceptable and a level of maintaining rights.
They say they have to be able to go home to their families and their homes. Well, this man was in his home with his family, and they invaded it. Now, what's the difference? They have the right to go home to their families after their job. He just came home from his job to his family, and they invaded it. No, there's something wrong with the system.
It's broken.
There's something wrong with the system. And the other thing they say is they were just doing the job.
Well, he was doing his job as a parent. He was doing his job as a parent, protecting his household.
And the father and protecting his family. But that is the reason people bring up Germany and the Gestapos is because when they were on trials and everything, they said, well, we were just doing our job. Well, just doing your job does not make it moral, nor does it make it right. If you're morally corrupted by your indoctrination from your job, then what you're doing is in your job is immoral. Just as they were immoral when they went in and killed people in their homes, when in the Jewish when they broke the glass something they called it. I can't remember right now. But this is the beginning. This is the way it begins. People are saying, oh, no, but they're not looking at their history. This is the way it begins. It's not there yet, but if this continues, it will get there. Read history. God, everybody, read your history. This is the way it begins. The people then were saying the same thing. The people are saying now, oh, it's their right. It's the way they have to be. We have to trade our security for the force for our security. No. If we do, we'll end up like they did in Germany. It's not there yet, but this began in the 60s when the police stopped being peace officers and they became dirty coppers, which became cops. That's the history.
It went from peace officer to law enforcement. They used to drive you home drunk in the day or follow you, and now it's just about generating revenue.
They used to take care of you, but now they don't.
Well, they've lost touch.
Officers.
I think they've lost touch with their oath to protect and maintain individual rights.
Listen, like I said, I used to date officers, and I used to have, and more recently, I had some friends that were sheriff's officers, and they were really great people until they put their uniforms on, and there was a personality change like Jekyll and Hyde. I no longer stayed friends with them when they became officers because they were not the same people. Something happens in that training. I don't know what it is, but They're great when their uniforms are off, but they change when they put those uniforms on.
I'd like to speculate on their training. I would speculate that their constitutional law teachers don't teach them how to abide by the Constitution. They probably teach them how to get around it, from my experiences with our local Pima County sheriffs.
I don't have any. All I know is there's been a major change since the 60s, a major change. And the young people that are coming up, and these people that are saying, that are younger ages, in their 30s and 40s probably, they don't know what it was like when there were real peace officers. And the real peace officers would quit. They quit their jobs. My friends that were peace officers quit when all this stuff started to happen, when it became more militaristic. And anybody that says it hasn't become militaristic does not remember the good old days when it was not. And it all began to happen with this war on drugs, when we all became the criminals and suspects, and they became the overseers and the overlords, and essentially the plantation guys with the whips and that could beat us whenever they want to.
Speaking of the war on drugs, how about should there be a law in the books for adrenaline junkie cops?
When I was about 15 or 20 years ago, or maybe 25 now, I don't know, I'm getting too old to remember, there was a thing that happened downtown Tucson. They wanted women to come aboard to become police officers. So I went down there. I said, well, you know what? I need a job. Maybe since I'm a constitutionalist, maybe this is where I need to be. Well, you know what? I was young and naive. Well, not so young, but still naive, even though I'd had a lot of experiences with it. So I thought maybe I could help out and be one of